What's up, YouTube? It's Ryan the Tone Geek, and today I have some very exciting news. Someone, which is now deleted on the Facebook page, someone uploaded photos of the inside of a John Mayer 2-rock signature, one of the 25. And if you can see here, there's some interesting things going on. So I'm going to give you a rundown of what my thoughts are and what these components are, and comparing them to prototypes and post-production 2-rock amps to see if we can do some deep dive analysis on what's going on under the hood. And I'll share with you all the pictures that were uploaded and now are deleted. So this is interesting stuff, and we're going to learn a lot. So let's dive right into it. Alright, so this is going to be sort of amp building guts identification. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego 101 for everyone. Probably not for most, but please, if you see something, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, let me know what you think down below if you're an amp builder or if you just have eagle eyes. So I'm going to go through all the pictures first of what we have and then go from there. So we have this gut shot kind of showing the back of where the speaker jacks are. Back panel. Here's the front of the panel to sort of justify legitimacy of the inside here. Another angle is more or less shows the front panel, the back of the front panel, and here's a preamp section. So that's all the photos that we have. So I'm going to start and work our way backwards. So what I'm going to do also is compare some of the values to Taylor from Amplified Nation's Wonderland layout that he generously posted for everyone. So awesome, Taylor, if you're watching, a big fan of yours. And I think I ordered, I know I ordered a jam chassis from you. I'm looking forward to putting it together. But anyway, here's his layout, and here is the amp that he used, which is a post-production John Mayer signature amp. There was a little bit of a business discontinuity issue with 2-rock for a period of time where a lot of the secrets were sort of let loose out into the wild, and a couple rogue amps, if you will, were built. And this is a byproduct of one of them. It's supposedly from the customer a actual John Mayer SIG, but the difference is that they left the board right side up. So all the values are the same. What I'm going to say about this picture is that the capacitors are not the same as the John Mayer, the real one, and that's likely because these atom capacitors, the blue ones, are pretty expensive, hard to come by. These IC caps, I'm surprised they even had them, but they're cheap. They're like $1 a piece. And if you're looking to make some money, that might be a good option for you. I'm sure the performance is good. Fender's been using them forever, so they got to be good and hold up to the test of time. Actually, my Fender Dual Professional has these IC chips in them and a lot of their reissues. So they're good. They're good caps. They're just not the ones that was in the original 25. But there's a lot of other things here that were in the original 25, such as this 1 microfarad. This is 400 volts, or 0.1 microfarad, sorry. 400 volts, orange drop. You see here, it's just easier to find the 600 volts 0.1, so that's likely why that's here on this layout. What's interesting to note here is you look on the treble on the Wonderland layout, and you see the value is a little high compared to the 250K nominal of that. And that is interesting because you look here on the treble pot, and there's an H on it, measures high. We look at the one over here, so I'm going to actually skip through, and you see an H, it measures high. Now, why would that be? Basically, these pots, my assumption, and working with Bamba, if you're a big fan of Bamba's work, he's also a detective. Him and I have been going back and forth, so some of this is his information, some of it's mine. But anyway, so the high basically measure on that will adjust where your noon position tone is on the treble. So since it's a really dark amp, you put a high pot in there and you're going to move that dial about 15%. Basically, if it was a regular value, it would be about 1 o'clock would be the same tone as if you put a high pot in there, the noon value. So if you're using a 250K pot, then your noon will actually be, compared to the original amp, 1 o'clock. Hopefully that makes sense. But that's why I think, and Bamba thinks, the H is on there. Going back, we see a lot of carbon film resistors. Those are 5%. You can tell 5% based on the gold kind of band on there. And if you ever get stuck, DigiKey has an awesome band calculator. You just basically type in what you see, and it gives you the response. So in this case, I was looking at the phase inverter resistors, and sure enough, the Wonderland layout is right. And not that I would expect it to be wrong, but it's right. That you got the 120 and the 110. That is a little different, and I don't think it matters much. It is a little different compared to the Ceriatone. I want to get it right this time. So that's just something there I've noticed. What else? So global negative feedback. Global negative feedback is kind of a big one because it sort of dictates how loose the amp is. And if you watch some of my other videos, the difference between a Ceriatone and the 2-rock and a steel string singer is completely 3 different values. So what I think we can learn something from that here, and then the resistor type, of course. This resistor I measured, I'm pretty sure that's brown, red, orange. Now what that is 8.2K. Sorry, that's 12K. 8.2 is what I used on mine. So that's a 12K metal film capacitor, so that, or resistor. That means that the metal film is supposedly a lot quieter or quieter than the carbon film resistors, which are the tan ones. What I think that's for is to give a more accurate negative and cleaner negative feedback into the circuit. And I don't know. Dumble used carbon composition resistors in that spot, and I think that was to give it the amp a little bit more personality. Ceriatone uses a carbon composition resistor there, and I think that gives it a little bit. It introduces noise into the circuit, which could be desirable, could warm things up. It's up to you. Maybe you should experiment with that. But we have a metal film capacitor in that location. Let me go back, and we're going to learn about a few other things in this shot. These brown capacitors, those are on the local negative feedback loops on the 9 pins. That brand, I'm pretty sure, is a Zycon based on the little hump here. Ooh, where are we at? I can detect a little hump here. The one thing I'm not too sure about is if it is or is not a Zycon, is it's a polypropylene instead of a polyester film. Some folks say the polypropylene is a little bit more hi-fi and a little bit more accurate, and almost too accurate in some cases. So I could see that being beneficial, especially since 2-rock seems to be using, or at least a method of very accurate negative feedback based on the metal film resistor for the global negative feedback. But what's interesting is that the resistor types for that local negative feedback is carbon film. So that's a little discrepancy from that thought process, in my opinion. But more or less it's information. What else can we learn from this photo? The wires look like Teflon coated high voltage wires. Really nice. The white here is coax wires. Likely you see there's no other connection at the end of this one going to the 9 pin. It's because a lot of the grounding you'll see on the other end of this wire is done right at the ground bus in the front of the amp. So that's kind of cool. This yellow resistor capacitor looks a lot like the yellow capacitors up front, And based on my research, I'm pretty sure that they are Vishay or BC components capacitors. They're yellow. They're 1 kilovolt rated X5F. I was sort of surprised that they didn't seek out C0G or NPO dielectric stability type. That just means that the heat, it just doesn't swing with heat. It's very accurate, but it might be too accurate for the tone of a amp. But I know that those capacitors are very desirable on a pedal for the clean, very clean, even though pedals are mostly at room temperature, but they give you a nice stable range. So that's, I think that any of the ceramic or low value picofarad capacitors is the Vishay or BC components, and I can find those on Mouser pretty easily. Let's keep looking here. What are we learning? What are we learning? It looks like the heater gauge is about 18 gauge, and let's dive into a little bit more. Oh, I don't think I talked about more of the preamp here. So right here you're going to see some Dale RN65D, I believe, resistors. I don't think there's a D at the end, but it looked like there was. Those are 1/2 watt military grade metal film precision resistors. Those are dropping the voltage. They're about 100K. You'll see them in that circuit. And they're really meant to keep the voltage going into the preamp nice and clean, very quiet, dropping resistors. If you had like the old days with carbon composition, that's a general point of noise, and because basically there's a thermal noise that's generated. These resistors are very, they don't do that sort of character. They don't have that characteristic. You may notice that some of the capacitors in the preamp have markings on them. That's for the metal foil wrap on them. Basically, it's the orientation, and I forget right now off the top of my head how you do it, but basically you can do a test to see which side of the capacitor. Even though it's non-polarized, there's a theory that you get a better signal-to-noise ratio if you have the low impedance side of the capacitor going one direction. So you'll see that there's a band on some of the capacitors just to identify what side is a high impedance and what side is a low impedance portion, just to adhere to that sort of methodology that you're going to get a better signal to noise ratio. So we talked about the capacitors, which is really cool. I hope I talked about. All right, so next up, I'm going to talk about or re-talk about, depending on the video cut, but why there's an H on this treble resistor, pot, and then you're going to see on the real amp that there's an H on that treble pot. And if you look at the Wonderland layout, the treble pot is measured. It has a 625 or 22K reading on it versus the nominal 250K. And the reason for that is if you're basically the amp is very dark and it's adjusting sort of synthetically the noon orientation of that treble pot. So when you're noon on a normal 250K, the tone compared to this amp would be about this amp would be at noon, and you would have to adjust your treble pot on your amp if your measurement was 250K about over to 1 o'clock, about 15% higher. These pots are not very stable as far as readings, and you can have a swing anywhere plus or minus 20%. So they must have picked, Two-Rock must have picked pots specific for this amp that way as one of the features, if you will, of the amp. Some folks, I believe I've seen a picture, Bamba has been wonderful with this information too, but he's seen a post-production or prototype, I can't remember, where the bass pot was actually low, so there's an L on the bass pot, which in my mind, would indicate a low reading on that pot. And that would basically make the amp a little bit less bassy, I think, is what I'm going to go with there. All right, so we're going to move over to the preamp. Oh, sorry, we already are on the preamp. What else can we learn just really quickly before I get off that topic about the preamp? You see another Dale metal film resistor here. That's going to basically be the bottom end of the, basically it prevents the bass from going off a cliff. I believe that's 1.8K military precision metal film resistor, and that's going to prevent, again, the bass from falling off. So when you go all the way to the bottom of the bass, you're not going to fall off the cliff and have like a really extremely trebly amp. That's another way to adjust the swing of where noon is on the amp. Yep, all polyester metal film, or sorry, all polyester orange drop caps. If I didn't mention it before, these are 600 volts, and that's a 400 volt capacitor, but 0.1 reading. And in the Amplified Nation layout, it's 0.1 UF, 600 volts, just because those are a lot easier to find than the 400 volt readings. And everything else looks, pretty similar. Now we're going to move on to the power section. In this power section, there's four Sprague Atom capacitors. These are 20 microfarad, and you can find them still. They're not NOS or whatever. They still make them. Here it is. Here's an example. 20 microfarad, 500 volts DC. Sprague capacitors are $12 each. So they are on the high end. According to Hoffman amplifiers, the new F&T capacitors are lower ESR ratings, so they're very quiet compared to the Atoms. They're both like pretty much really quiet, but the F&T has a little bit more of an edge to it as far as quiet and ESR ratings. What else? These first two caps in the Amplify Nation post-production John Mayer amp, they're IC, they're 220 microfarad, but I think that these might be just 200 microfarad, either Ruby or F&T. I don't think I have one up here right now, but there's, here we go. So here's an amp, another post-production, pre-production amp with a little bit more ratings on it, and the labels haven't been wiped off. So in here you're going to see, I think this might be a Ruby 200, maybe it's measuring high, so maybe it is a 220 capacitor in that section. What also is kind of interesting is, just for keeping things neat, I guess, the global negative feedback must be tapped. It's tapped off the 8 ohm, and it must be under this board somewhere to go over to the global negative feedback resistor over here. Probably just to prevent any sort of, what's it called? Basically, it's just preventing any local noise getting into that line, which can create squeal and oscillation. There's the word I was looking for. It'll prevent oscillation by doing that. So that's pretty cool that they did that. It's under the board, that tap. And this amp doesn't tell us too much more, other than they must have attempted to do, it says 4-Mayer on here. It's a 50-watt version of his SIG, I think. And the difference is that they went all in on the metal film resistors, which is kind of interesting, and a trend that I'm seeing more and more with the new 2-Rock amps, is that they're going with all metal film, again, for the same reason that it's a lower noise resistor. Anytime there's thermal noise generated when you go AC wave, high voltage, low voltage, all of that, it's creating some thermal noise, some micro thermal noise, and that's going to reduce that. So it's interesting that that's a thing that they started gravitating towards. Some say that it's less organic, it's more hi-fi. to each their own. What else can we learn? What else can we learn in my last couple of minutes? I think all these points are pretty much buttoned up. It looks like now the output transformer is just a classic tone Fender style output transformer. We basically found, Bamba did the research, he found someone to take a picture of the bottom of a real JM SIG, took that part number, compared it with a classic tone, and reached out to their customer service. And their customer service came back with an equivalent part number, but with more taps. So it's the same, it's just a classic tone Fender output 100 watt style. The power transformer is believed to be a Fender twin reverb power transformer. So it's the high voltage sort of SSS styles, the same one that Dumble used in his. So that makes sense. These boards, I don't really see them anymore, but they're fiber board that looks like wood. Nothing special there. 5 watt 470 ohm. Most of these resistors are either half watt or 1 watt. These metal oxides are 3 watts. That's pretty much it. The grounding scheme is kind of basic. You have your bus bar going all the way across, and in the back there's not much. The speakers are grounded to the chassis. That's kind of important to know. Just for noise, grounding plane or star ground sort of methodology, that's kind of an approach. That's the last bit of the signal chain, so you'd want to ground that against your chassis, and plus it's a good stable ground. You see that they did a star, like a washer that has a lot of teeth on it. That's to give a good ground locking washer, starred locking washer, because it bites into the chassis and on the speaker jack. I don't think that's much more. If I was to build this amp, and I'm contemplating building it from scratch exactly how Two Rock did it, I would use Carling mini toggle switches. I think that those are the best. That's what I've used here on mine. It's very authoritative, and that's really it. The orange is just a regular, this is a regular Fender indicator bulb. Nothing special there. These are all built-in sockets for your tubes. It's an 8-pin, and here's built-in 9-pin from the bottom up. That's it, guys. There's not much more to go into here. Oh, there's my amp. Yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think, and we can have a great discussion about what I got right, what I got wrong, in your opinion, and just overall, what do you think about the pictures? Is this great news? Is this okay news? Is this old news? I think there's a lot to discuss here, and it's not on here anymore, but congrats to Tommy from the Tappa Talk. He scored insanely good deal, and there was a flash listing for a real number, the number 6 serial number, John Mayer Two Rock, for under $8K. I don't know how he did it or found it. It's just amazing. No one else saw it. It was a flash sale or something. I don't know. It's causing mass confusion across the John Mayer gear fans. But congratulations, Tommy. That's really cool. And we'll get more into this and other amps shortly. See ya.